This is the You Winning Life Podcast, your number one source for mastering a positive existence. Each episode, we'll be interviewing exceptional people, giving you empowering insights, and guiding you to extraordinary outcomes. Learn from specialists in the worlds of integrative and natural wellness, spirituality, psychology, and entrepreneurship, so you too can be winning life. Now, here's your host, licensed marriage and family therapist, certified neuro-emotional technique practitioner, and certified entrepreneur coach, Jason Wasser.
As you heard, we're hanging out with Adrian today, and we're going to do a little bit of a reverse engineer in today's conversation. And, as you know, we're getting closer to episode 200. And Adrian and I were pre-gaming, and you always hear me how sometimes we should record the pre-game, and there's always something good coming out of that. But Adrian and I were talking about now at this point of getting close to 200, how I'm being even more selective, how many people are reaching out to be on the show and how many people I'm not getting back to, because I want this to be a perfect fit for everybody who is listening. So first of all, Adrian, thank you so much, because I think a while ago, this was on our calendars and one of us had to cancel and one of us had to reschedule. And so we're finally making it happen. So I really want to thank you for hanging out with us.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah. So there's a ton of cool stuff that are going on. You got some podcasts, you got some business coaching, you got all these really wonderful things that are happening in your world. Let's start off with just what's happening right now. What are you doing right now? What are you working on that's coming in? And then let's reverse engineer that into the next stage, which is the question that I'll have after that.
Well, the most important thing I'm doing right now is raising 2 children. I've got an 11-year-old boy named Scout. I'm coaching his baseball team. We're 6-1. You guys didn't ask, but we're 6-1.
Nice.
And we didn't lose the one game. They beat us, so good for them. Couple clutch hits. Good for those guys. But anyway, but coaching Scout's team, being involved in as much as possible in school. I'm taking Friday off to be at the school for their Olympics they've got, and supporting my daughter. She finally found the activity she loves, which is just like circus, like Cirque du Soleil stuff. I put her in every ball sport possible. None of it worked, but this she loves. So she just had her first performance last weekend. So that's the most important thing I'm doing, because that's the future. And I take fathering really seriously, and I love it, partially because I'm a human development person, and I honor the role of a father in a kid's life. I mean, the role of a mother is pretty natural, and it's like, baked in some ways, and there's space for it. And but the role of fathering has been, I think, a pretty big roller coaster over the last few centuries about what that means. There's lots of ways in which it doesn't work, and we have all generational pain because of that. And I'm standing in the gap I'm really committed to figuring it out. Like I tell my kids all the time, I'm committed to being the best dad on the planet. And you know what? I'm not the best dad on the planet. I know that. But we're going to be in a conversation about how I can be for you, Scout, and for you. 2 very different answers, right? Each kid needs something else. So obviously I could talk about this for 7 hours. But anyway, that's the most important thing I'm doing now, is learning how to be an effective dad. And I mess it up all the time. But here I am, keep getting up, going again. And so that's the most important thing. I do get to work with phenomenal human beings, both on my team, all of which have changed my life deeply. And they'd probably say the same about me. And they're world-class at what they do. And I'm, giving myself to being the same. And then we get to work with phenomenal human beings that are mostly founders of companies, which I have a deep love for people that have decided to lead. And some of them might not even say it that way. I wouldn't even say it that way. I was like just a leader when I just showed up in the world. I don't know if it was that natural. I know it was a choice, because I just felt better as a leader than as a follower. Like, probably just internal angst. It's like, what are we doing here? Oh, no, it's up for grabs. Oh, I'll choose. I'll go. I'll do that. And leadership was always a place of becoming for me, and a place of constant feedback for me. And so I always feel the conversations that are leaders in that they're not having with other people, just because I've, been in it for a long time, and I have no conversations too dangerous for me. So it's like the biggest honor of my life is to go have a conversation with someone they're dying to have, but scared to death to have. I say it for myself as like gravity, I always need more help than I want. Always.
Yeah.
That ratio is always clear, and it's always more positive on the need side. And just because I'm a type A guy, driven guy, Competitive guy. I think I'll get an extra star if I do it by myself.
Yeah, yeah. Do you find that
So
more as a masculine role that in the business world,
I
especially?
I think so, unless there's like a real type A woman that's there to like have a chip on her shoulder and she's there to like prove it or like do it for, the female gender or something, and she might really even be more committed to doing it because in her view and probably in her history, definitely in the meta narrative,
Yeah.
women are trying to overcome, so she won't take more help because help would mean she's feminine or something like that. So, but guys in general, I mean, I think human beings in general, I mean, we talk about it, the
Yeah.
four survival needs: looking good, feeling good, being right, being in control. Those are happening nonstop. We don't get a vote on that. You do get to decide the volume of them in your head, but they're always playing. That music
Mm,
is always playing in the elevator. Looking good, feeling good, being right, being in control. The four survival needs, we call them ego needs, if
yeah.
you want to call them that. But so anyway, I get to come alongside of founders of companies. They're all brilliant. They're all driven. They're all adventurous. They're all activity. They're all very active, and most of them have a lot of relational collateral damage in their lives
Mm,
because for lots of reasons. But they're driving. They're going, and people tend to treat other people the way they like to be treated, and they've usually treated themselves like tools their whole lives to get somewhere. And so when they get human beings around them, they're just the next tool to use, and people don't like being treated that way. Let alone if you're going to build a culture, there's going to be conflict, and they, we're not trained on how to like deal with people, like deal with conflict. So anyway, that's a lot of my work is helping
yeah.
leaders get real about
Mm,
what's actually happening. And we call it hugging the cactus. It's going to hurt when you get
yeah.
honest. It's going to be real bad. It's worse than you think. It is worse than you think, and that's
Mm,
okay. But if you don't put your arms around that, you can't get anywhere new. You can like have activity that looks new, but you just got more shit that you're carrying around.
right.
So anyway, helping them resolve things, and those are usually end up looking like miracles to them because, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe this one conversation shifted 2 years of angst. That's
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
It's like I could tell lots of stories that are flying through my head right now of recent offsites I've done with executive teams. So anyway, that's what I love doing. I've always been weird and odd, and like in my family, I was like way too serious for them and way too intense, and like they called me Aid growing up. Aid, everything's not that philosophical. I'm like, unless it is, how do you know? Everything's not that complicated. Well, how do you know? I see 25 layers to this. How do you build a friend? That's
Everything's
a
not a
big question.
therapy. Everything's not a therapy conversation,
Well, yeah,
but it is, right? But it
that,
is. Yeah.
yeah, that. How do you build a friend? That's a
Yeah.
long. There's how many layers are there to that question? What does it mean to be a friend? Anyway, so I've
Yeah.
always been that
Mm,
way, which made me, a lot for a lot to myself, by the way, and a lot to a lot of other people. And now I get to be this and make good money doing it. And I am not. I mean, I'll shut up so you can ask the next question.
yeah.
But there was a. You're probably a Paul Simon fan.
I am.
You are, yeah. One of my favorite Paul Simon songs. What's your favorite Paul Simon song, by the way?
Oh, geez. I mean, do you want with Simon and Garfunkel, or do you want Paul Simon, like, the
Whatever.
whole,
Listen,
diamonds
whatever
on the
you
soles of
want.
his
Whatever
shoes?
you
You
want.
want, geez. I mean, that's a tough one. I mean,
That's
like,
a,
the concert in Central Park is one of my favorite albums ever.
yep. Yep.
So that's like asking you, like, of your favorite artists that you've ever seen, that if they ever got back together, how much money would? That's funny enough that you asked me about Paul Simon. They're the only band that if ever got back together again would have zero. Like, my budget would not be how much would not be. There would be no budget to go see
Right.
them.
To go see Simon
So
and Garfunkel.
to go see Simon and Garfunkel, that's
All
the
right.
only people. Yeah.
Now you have to answer the question.
Emotionally, Sound of Silence.
Aha. And
Emotionally, not because it's so cliche, but because it's something that I have
psychedelic.
childhood memories around, and it's also probably the first song I played on the guitar.
Oh wow. Have you listened to the Disturbed version of that?
I have.
Woo. We play it. We do a 4-day leadership training, and on the third day, when shit's getting deep, we play that, and it just it stuns the
Yeah,
room.
David Draymond is a powerhouse of a human being.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
So That's great. I just played "Call Me Al" for my kids for the first time.
Uh,
Yeah, the video, the
the
music video,
video.
Chase.
Yeah.
And I was
Classic.
singing. Same night, I was singing "50 Ways to Leave a Lover," which
See,
is
these are
a classic.
classics. Yeah, these are
Classic.
much later. Yeah, much
But
later
there
Paul
are,
Simon. But yeah.
but I bring it up because when I was going through a big transition in my life, um, which was leaving a marriage, getting my life together in many ways, having tons of friends exit, and I had earned a lot of that because I've been living this
Mhm.
double life thing, which if you want to get into, we can. Um, and anyway, it was just a huge transition in my life. I would call it reconstituting myself. Now, there was this Paul Simon song ministered to me and he healed me, which I think
Hmm.
that's what that word means. But still crazy after all these years. Classic
Yeah.
song. I'd listened to it a million times. If folks haven't listened to that, if anybody's like under the age of 35 and have not listened to that song, listen to that song. It is a whole progression. I mean, the saxophone in the middle tells you something new's coming. Anyway, there's a line after that simply goes, "I would not be convicted by a jury of my peers, still crazy after all." And I thought, oh, I need new peers.
Hmm.
I am convicted by these folks because, I raised my hand and said, "Hey, I need help. I've messed things up, blah, blah, blah." And they said, "F you, you hurt our feelings, can't trust you, goodbye." Cool, that's human. Love you. Yet but the folks that stuck through it are folks that had owned any kind of stuff in their life and have suffered in life, and those guys came close. And I thought, oh, these are my people, the folks that are willing
Mhm.
to get out of the automatic, life's great, no problems, I'm good. No. I like being with the folks that are like, oh, today is a shitty. I am fucking struggling. I don't know what's going on in life. I'm successful and blah, 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 but man, I'm lost. I like those folks. I like gritty folks. So now I get to do that. I get to have the real deal conversation. Like there's no deep end too deep for me. There's no conversation too tough. There's
Mhm.
nothing like let's rock and roll. That's how life becomes vital for me.
Yeah.
So
There's some wording that you use in describing something. So you started off with like, at first I'm trying to be a great dad, and then you said, no, I'm committed to being a great dad. So,
okay.
one of the things that I love doing with my clients is even forget the thing that they're trying to describe, but it's the words that they're using to describe that thing
Oh
is
yeah.
equally as important, right?
Yeah.
And I know, like, you caught yourself in
Yeah.
that. I'm not trying to. I'm committed to.
Yes.
Unpackage that from your perspective about that nuance of
Sure.
trying versus committed and how that applies to what you're doing in your professional world.
Well, who was it? You'll probably know the answer to this. There was some author, philosopher that said words become worlds. Do you know who said that?
No,
I don't.
thoughts or things was one of them.
Yeah,
But
words become worlds. Because my first thought is, oh, there's a universe difference between if I'm trying to do something or if I'm committed to doing something. Why? Because the language reveals the relationship, and I think in all of life, I'll say things like kind of superlative like that. You don't have to believe them, and I don't even necessarily believe them that way, but it's good to at least try it on that way.
mhm.
That all of life is a relationship. Period. Like we're on this podcast, we're not on the same podcast. You're on your version in your head. I'm on my version in my head.
Right.
Is this good? Is this bad? Are we like you? Do you trust me? Do I not? All that is like choices I'm consciously or unconsciously making, period.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a podcast happening. There's Jason's version and Adrian's version, and we both call them the podcast. So that's frightening to people because we'd prefer things to be static. Because if it's dynamic and if I get to always choose what I'm making up, then I'm on the hook for what it is to me. And what it is to me is what I'll be responding to. We've got like 3 kind of major pillars. This will hook back into trying versus committing. First thing is people react to the world according to the way the world occurs to them. Number 1. So perception's reality, and I'm perceiving. I'm the perceiver. Right. So, and I'm going to react to what I say this thing is. Number 1. Number 2 is the world happens or occurs for people in language. Right. Which is your point.
Mhm.
There's a big difference between trying and committed to, because it reveals where I'm coming from. And I'll get to that in a second. But the third one is where all the money is future-based language creates present state. And these are really illuminated in a phenomenal book, a little bit of a boring business book called 3 Laws of Performance. If people haven't read that, it's kind of worth listening to. But these principles we coach through all the time. So now, trying versus committed to. Trying is, I think, the most popular way of justifying not getting something done. Because I get to look good. Listen, I tried. I was doing this thing and I tried to do it and it didn't work out, right? So I give myself credit for effort.
I showed up.
I showed up.
Participation trophy.
That's right. Listen, I tried, but circumstances, the other person, my history, the fill in the blank, whatever it is.
The market, the tariffs, whatever.
Exactly. It's like, so it's just saying, hey, the responsibility for the outcome is out there in the universe somewhere. And it usually presents as what I call a gesture. So even in a training, sometimes when somebody's, we do this 4-day thing called the revenant process that your folks would probably really dig checking out. Mm-hmm. But if somebody's really into the word trying, I'll have them get up and I'll usually have a marker in my hand. I'll say, hey, go ahead and try to take this out of my hand. And they'll grab it and they'll pull it out. I'm like, no, you took it out of my hand. No, try to take it out of my hand. And then they'll be confused. Like they don't get it. I'm like, no. So act like you're going to take it. And so they make them be all dramatic and it's very funny. But that's the thing. It's like looking like I'm doing the thing. That's trying.
Yeah.
So committed to is, I'm going to give everything I got and I'm going to be willing to transform over and over and over again and do whatever it takes in order to generate, and if I'm doing it with another person, to co-generate this outcome. And now that's a very complicated endeavor. So for example, I'm committed to having a deep friendship with my kids. Deep. Like, not like I'm their buddy, but I'm like my son said it to me the other day because he was having some conflict and he was just having some conflict. I'll leave out some details. He was having some conflict. And I just said, hey, why does that issue never happen with me? And he said, you've got standards. I thought that was interesting. And I only say that because I know I'm programming him to, I say it this way, we're always training people how to be with us, period. We're always training people how to be with us. So I'm committed to having a deep friendship with my kids. Now, I can't guarantee that because I don't know if they want that. I partially have that because I've always wanted that with my dad, and that's not going to happen in the way that I would prefer it, just because he's not that kind of guy and doesn't talk about that kind of stuff and doesn't think the way I think, and so he's not that. He can't meet me. He's not interested, and I don't say that as a dig. He's just not that guy that wants to go talk about.
It's not his wheelhouse.
Deep stuff. Yeah, he just doesn't roll that way, and they might not. But all that to say is I'm committed to having the better way of saying it, I'm committed to having the deepest relationship my kids are willing to have with me. So that means I've got to be really honest. That means I've got to be really responsible and really accountable and listen to them. And also give them a wall to lean on. And also when they blow it, be straight up with them and be really gracious with them. So they feel like being with me is both safe and progressive simultaneously. So when I say committed, I say that I'll do whatever it takes, and I'll reinvent myself 1,000 times to be the person that they can connect with without betraying myself and my own values and commitments. Yeah. I'm not going to go be the one they need me to be and acquiesce to them because that's not a gift to them either. Yeah. So I hope that makes sense. Does that
it makes sense.
It's a long answer, but yeah.
No, it's a perfect answer because some of the notes that I took while you were talking was the trying versus committed, and then this idea of deciding to lead. Right, you're working with people that are deciding to leave, and a lot of times, this is that space that we were talking about the pre-conversation was the people that I work with that don't even realize what's out there, and it's that reverse engineer conversation of well, if you were to make your own job description for the company that you're in, let's say you're an entrepreneur, right? You're working for a company, you're helping them grow, and the more you help them to grow, hopefully the more, benefit there is to you, right? Which is a whole other conversation if the businesses don't incentivize that. But let's just say you are, right? How do you decide to lead in that scenario?
Yeah.
where you notice that there are things that need to happen. You notice that is spaces that can be filled in, and you have an expertise in that area.
Yep.
Do you have the audacity
Yep.
to create a job description, to present that to the powers that be above you and say, listen, here's where I know I can be at a next stage helpful?
Yes.
Versus people who are just going along a path of, well, here's the job description. I had this job last time. This is a step up. So I have to prove myself at this step. And then when I do that for a couple of years, then I can apply to this thing. Like, it's still like playing within, like, it's like when Harlem Globetrotters or the Savannah Bananas decided to change basketball and baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's still the same sport, but they're changing all of about it. And of course, right, Harlem Globetrotters sell out a stadium. Savannah Bananas just sold out, what is it, Auburn's or one of those big 70,000 stadiums, 70,000 person stadiums for a baseball game. Not happening anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
But they're still playing within the confines of this is baseball. It's just banana ball.
Yes.
Where do you see that people are getting stuck from that, like, well, I want to do this, or they're even, like you're saying, like these big CEOs or people who've decided to start a company, but they're still playing within a script. They're still playing within this normalized, here's how all these other companies do it. I just have to follow that path, but in my company, and we'll be okay, versus how do I completely reform or transform what this even is to even think about this in that path?
Yeah, I could answer that question, which is like more folks I work with. My first thought is to answer it with more of like who your listeners are, like what you described about folks that are working in businesses. Just because I've been doing this, almost 15 years, I think. Time's weird, but I think that's about right. And I first started coaching mostly middle manager folks because they're like my age at the time. I'm almost 45 now, so I was like early 30s. And the confession is I've never had a corporate job. Never. Why? I'd get fired. Probably. Because I'm not good inside, systems that I think aren't working very well. And there's things we don't want to talk about. And it's like, no, thanks.
Yeah.
So, so principally, where do people get stuck? Well, first off, they don't get stuck. I don't believe that. I mean, that's natural vernacular. And I used to, and I actually ran a training because I hooked into it. I used it as marketing. I said, getting unstuck, because people say I'm stuck, right? So first off, you're not stuck. You've made choices to justify settling for mediocre results, and you're just busy complaining about it, I would say. So that's pretty tough language. But just try it on for a second. Have I made choices to justify mediocre results, and I'm busy complaining about it? And if you ask yourself that question honestly, and then look around, ask your spouse, hey, how often do I complain about work? Just ask that question, and then look at their face, and guarantee you they'll be smiling. Or if you look back at the last week and who have I been complaining about? What have I been complaining about? There'll be things that pop up. Now, complaining, I don't think is a problem. I don't think it's a sin. I think it is an indication of vision that's not yet, it's latent vision, right? Any of my complaints are something I care about that I'm not willing to give myself to.
Yeah.
But I'll complain to act like I care about it instead of being like I care about it. Because if I actually cared about it, I'd do something else than complain about it. So, all right. Now, for folks that might call themselves stuck, big distinction in my work is, am I playing not to lose, or am I playing to win? So if I'm stuck, I would assert you're probably playing not to lose. So I was loving your description, by the way. So slowly, methodically doing this kind of, I'm on this ladder and let me color within the lines, and then maybe next year. And they see this opportunity, but they're not willing to write their own job description. And the audacity to go point out something that either their bosses haven't noticed or are intentionally not noticing, don't want to deal with. Mm-hmm. Two very different conversations to have. So if they're not noticing it, you need to delicately point these things out, but also speak their interests, not your desires. So your boss probably is committed to two things. One has to get some kind of results. Secondly, they probably have been there longer than you, and they want to not get fired. Most people live in corporate America to not lose the kingdom they've built. So if that's true, you have to, look at it from that, not judging that. Even if it's an ego play, if Tom's an egomaniac, but you need to work with Tom, then you need to work with Tom's egomania, not to justify it, but that's the only way to work with Tom, is to help him see it and help him even get credit for it. That's also okay. So tons of ideas here. So there's that, or if there's things they don't want to talk about, that's the tougher decision for folks. Because we'll choose security naturally as human beings. We'll choose security over adventure. Naturally. Because being safe and being in control, especially if you have a family, especially if you have kids, most folks have bought into, life. It's just the way life is, man. That's just part of having a job. How many times have you heard that? Part of having a job, part of working with people.
It's growing up. That's just getting older.
That's
right.
it, man. Listen.
It's the resigning yourself paradigm, right? That's right. At this stage of my life, with this circumstance, this is that's just to be expected.
That's right. Just take this dose of indifference, will you?
Yeah.
Right. And that's there is a spiritual, emotional, psychological effect of that on a person, just deciding, I am not going to get what I really want. And that's a legacy too. So for folks that feel stuck, just think about, what am I interested in and what am I actually willing to give myself to? It might mean I might need to go change jobs. In most conversations I was in with folks, and it's like, why don't you go find a leadership team that's worth having you around? Why have you settled working with these schmucks? They obviously don't see you. They don't value you. And that's if you've had all the conversations and if you've had them in the right way. And if you've, walked it all the way out. Most folks don't take a stand for anything, and they want other people to choose them, but they don't pick themselves first, right? Which is your point. I see this, hey, if I'm going to be here for the next 5 years, I want to give myself to a big challenge with big results for the company. That would really serve me and my family the most. Can we do that? Or can I create big results for the company? Would you like? Oh, you would? Yeah. And I want a big challenge, almost help this thing redevelop over time. And I just really need satisfaction. Most folks underrepresent their personal vision, and they don't articulate it. This is the boss's job, is to help people there's a corporate vision and personal vision. And if those aren't aligned, they won't stay.
No.
Or if they do stay, they're just going to complain all the time.
And create more chaos. And I'm wondering, with that, if, let's say, you and I are partnering on this idea, and we're going around to businesses, and I see this all the time, right? Where you have the org chart, right? The proverbial org chart. And these are relatively static changes here and there. The titles might be different here and there, but for all intents and purposes, there are particular roles at particular levels of a business.
Yep.
But the truly successful listen, you can have the wash and repeat, and you're going to still have layers of unhappiness, and you may have a good culture, and that whole idea of just because you put an espresso machine in your, in a ping pong table, doesn't mean you're creating good culture for your people. But what would it be like if companies started asking, what is your wheelhouse? What is your expertise? What are you passionate about? Yep. What can you bring? Right? Here's what you know about the company. Here's what you've seen has been happening in the company.
Yep.
Here's what's working well. Here's what you can see what needs improvement on. Create a job description around that and revamp an entire company around people who are doing that. Yep. I'm really curious. This is obviously a massive social experiment. Do you know of any companies, or are you working with any teams that are doing just that versus let's get rid of the proverbial, yes, we still need to have hierarchies and stuff like that. But if we were to revamp the whole thing, instead of, we're going to put you in this position and then you can grow into that position and you have to work with that person, versus here's what I know, what I can really add, versus trying to stay into your box of what you think I can add.
I don't think I've heard it quite that way, just because, I think let's see, let me add to that. So I think that's it's a great context for folks. If I'm running a company, I want people to think about, what's your biggest gift? And can you prove it? And can it generate results versus just be kind of a millennial, I deserve to do whatever I feel like doing, and it's what I call passion, which is not obviously the true definition of passion. But it's like, I'm not going to, this job isn't a place to go entertain yourself. It is a place to express yourself. But if you're working here and I'm paying you, you got to like generate results towards what I'm paying you to do. So it's like this
Correct.
kind of both and thing.
Yeah.
I don't know any companies that just say, hey, what's your big, I mean, I used to work at
I mean, it has to be within alignment, obviously, of the brand and the mission,
right on.
and the revenue generating activities.
Well, the thing that also just comes to mind, I work with a beauty brand. I coach the head of brand at this place called The Ordinary, which just got sold to Estee Lauder out of Toronto, and she's an ex Nike gal, and I coached all these Nike people. So all my clients have all just come via relationships.
Yeah.
And anyway, she's like most corporations. This corporation sent out an anonymous survey, an annual anonymous survey about, and I'm just like not a fan of anonymous surveys, period, for 25 reasons. Which I won't get into for the sake of time. But then I talked to my client whose name's Amy, and she's phenomenal. And I said, why don't you run a non-anonymous survey? Like on your own, just run your own in your own division, which she did. And about, I don't know, 25% of her people answered. And then she got to have 25 conversations with people around this, essentially. Like, what am I not seeing? What needs to happen here? What are you guys talking about that I'm not hearing about? And all this, which is like tilling the soil for where the resource is, because culture is the network of conversations among people, meaning like, what are the permissions? What do we talk about? What do we not talk about? What does it mean? What does it mean to be a team? All those, that's what culture is. That's the context behind it. So I think it'd be really helpful if as a leader, be in a conversation that's provocative with your people. Because, when it comes to work, especially coming out of baby boomer, or maybe if they're 30s, maybe that early Gen X, like they just go to their job, right? This is not where I am. This is what I'm doing so that I can go back to life. And that's where we get work-life balance thinking, which I'm not a fan of, because it's like, oh, this is life, and then there's work, and I just go be this version of myself that's not very happy, and I'm not on my best behavior, and I don't think that my work life has anything to do with my integrity or not, or my level of honesty and any of that. This is work, Adrian. And then there's real Adrian over here. Like that type of thinking generates a ton of despair. So, but if you see your work as a place to like make your best contribution, both to society, not that it has to be this way, but both to society and to your own personal development, then you're going to get a lot more out of it, and you're going to be provocative, and you're going to offend a lot of people, because a person alive offends the zombies, period. Right? Yeah. You're going to talk about in the meeting what everybody else has just decided we're not going to talk about. And you're going to be the one saying, hey, this thing happened last week and I don't see it on the agenda. Can we please talk about this? Like that will offend the folks that have just decided to be a zombie at work.
We're done with it. Yeah. Or we're done with it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. What's interesting as you're talking about this, I'm also picturing the same conversation needing to happen in relationships of all factors, of all flavors, right? What you just described is equally applicable to a couple.
Oh yeah.
What are the conversations that we need to be happening? What are the conversations we need to be having that we're not having? What's the things I need to be looking at that I'm not looking at? Because if we're in a relationship, right, whether it's a professional relationship or a romantic relationship, we don't realize, and I see this all the time with my couples, is if your spouse is giving you crap about a particular thing for a particular period of time, even though it might be their thing to work on about why it's bothering them, but what happens if there's also a little bit of truth in it? Mm-hmm. Why can't it be both? Why can't it be their problem? Right? Let them go work on it. Let them figure out why that's triggering them specifically, but also why can't there be truth in it? And what is it that you have to look at that you're not looking at? Yeah. And I see that applies in multiple frameworks. And this is why, as a therapist who loves working in this, I say I don't work with entrepreneurs. I work with those who are entrepreneurial in their mindset. Yep. Because you don't have to be an entrepreneur to have that. Yep. Where this whole process of the more accountability you take, the more keyed into your core values and making decisions on your core values will never be the wrong, right? It won't be like, oh, what job do I take? It's, well, which ones align with your core values? Then no job will ever be the wrong one as long as you're sticking to your core values. That's right. Right? And that idea of those that become your standards, those that become your boundaries. So the amount of chaos will be radically diminished through that process. Right.
Yeah. I definitely, when I've got my work hat on, but I think really across the board, I often say, which people don't know how to deal with it, I say, I'm really unoffendable.
Mm.
That doesn't mean that I don't get offended at times, or doesn't mean that I don't get angry, or I think people are stupid. Like, that happens. But
Plenty of
but
those, yeah.
I'm just unwilling to stay offended by anybody. So they could, especially when I'm working with folks, like, they could say anything. It's cool. I'm just really curious. What do you mean by that? And where do you see that? So I'm thinking about relationships. So, like, if maybe to your point, if your spouse has got some kind of chronic complaint, yeah, that's theirs to work through. But, like, tell me how let's assume, because here's my
Mhm.
assertion, is that, and this works in relationships and work. Here's how I talk about it in the workplace. It's like, if any meeting sucks, and you're there, it's your fault.
Yeah.
I don't usually say the word fault, but it's like,
And
it's because people
your
love to say,
ownership.
people love to say it's his meeting. I don't know why we're doing this, but it's his meeting. I'm like, well, you're there. So so we always say the system always generates the results the system was set up to create, right? So if I'm in a relationship and my spouse has a chronic complaint and I'm unwilling to at least even examine how I'm contributing to it. I mean, if it's a chronic complaint, I guarantee there is contribution. It might not be in this moment. You might
Mm.
have to go back in time. We don't have much time left. But I used to work in prison with murderers. We do these 3-day leadership trainings with lifers.
Wow.
And we ran this, the crux of the training was called victim responsible. So we talked about, what does it mean to play the victim? What does it mean to be responsible? And we had them sit down, like, so tell your life story. You got 2.5 minutes. Tell your life story. And just what happened. Why'd you come to prison? So they do it that way. And they go, partner A, partner B, blah, blah. And then we say, okay, here's what it means to play the victim. Now, partner A, go again. Your job is to convince partner B that you're the victim in the story. Obviously, really loud,
Yeah.
wonderful stories, juicy. We're all good at this. And but then I said, hey, pay attention to what was your experience as you were telling the story. They were angry, they were resentful, they were despairing, they were, all that stuff. And then we said, okay, good. Now, what's it mean to be responsible? Da da da. Now you have to tell the exact same story, but your job is now convince the person that you're responsible. You know what they had to do? They got to go back in time. Because when I was 16, I could have stayed with my grandmother, but instead I stayed at Pookie's house.
Right.
And I
It's
could have.
always Pookie. It's
I,
always
I,
Pookie.
I know. I could have got the job at the corner store, but instead I started slinging drugs.
Right.
I could have, I knew anyway, to be curious about what responsibility you have, you usually have to go back in time, because when something's a shit buffet, it started as a shit hors d'oeuvre. You just didn't eat it then. And then you send it back to the kitchen, becomes a shit sandwich, and then a two course, 5 course. Then it's a shit buffet, and people complain about it, but you don't realize I didn't eat it back then and I saw it. And that's part of being responsible. So,
Do you
yes,
see that? Yeah,
you.
go on. No, yeah. So I'm just wondering, like, over the last year, I've been playing with this idea of the hills that we're willing to die on, and everybody has those, but I don't know if anybody has ever sat down. If a lot of people have sat down and saying, like, what are the legitimate hills I'm willing to die on? But how can I remove those to make those the least amount possible?
Okay. Give an example.
Um, Politics.
Okay.
Right. The world is so fractured right now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be friends with such and such because they automatically, we're assuming if they're different, then they must have these beliefs and therefore that's contradictory to me. Versus, so therefore I'm not going to be friends with them. I'm not going to talk to them. I'm not going to, right, I'm going to cancel them, whatever it might be. As opposed to, I'm not willing to die on that hill anymore. I want to get
Yeah.
to know them for them and get to know the story. Because at the end of the day, what I'm finding is still 80% of what we're doing in our day to day is relatively similar, no matter where you're coming from.
Yes.
We
No.
all want a
Yeah.
good life. We all want peace. We all want to put food on the table. We all want, right? We may be doing that in a different way, but I'm wondering, like, even in these business settings where we need to do this by such and such time, and if that doesn't happen, our mission has failed. How did you decide that that should be the mission in the first place? So again, then that makes it its own hill that a lot of times companies die over.
Right. Yeah, like an unwillingness in that context, like an unwillingness to befriend what's happening. I think of it this way. I have so many thoughts about what you're talking about. Even just what flashes, like one of my biggest mistakes when I was paid to go do a leadership training just happened like 2 weeks ago.
Mm.
And it was because of this, because it was like, we're done with the day, phenomenal day. I'm in Austin with a group of 6 leaders, and there was a guy that was there, and his political views surprised me, number one. and he's a smart guy, successful guy. They were in my judgment, they were very superficial. Like not a lot of, I was asking questions and like his answers were like talking points from his very extreme side of the aisle.
Mhm.
And I got hooked. I mean, in that I'm kind of paid to be the guy to help deal with stuff, but man, I got fired up and it really bifurcated the room. My behavior bifurcated the room. I just, instead of, saying, hey, you know what? It's apparent this guy doesn't want to have a conversation. He just wants to spout his talking points from his side of the aisle.
Right.
And I'm sensitive to those. And it was honestly fueled because I know this guy and I know what he's up to in life and I know his challenges and I know the dogma he sits in is ruining his life. Not the ideas, but his relationship to the ideas, how right he is where he's stuck in his career and with his kid.
Yeah.
And I missed it. All that to say is I got hooked by him. And what else was I going to say? But I just want to confess that, I mean, just like I get hooked just like anybody else to that point. But with that, it's like I think to your second point, current reality is always looking for a spokesperson. So if I'm running a company and it's not working, most of us, a lot of people will like think that sticking with the wrong idea is victory because I look like I'm giving all I've got instead of the, hey, am I willing to be wrong what I have previously not only thought, but convinced if I'm a great leader, I've evangelized and I got everybody and to stand up in front, hey guys, it's not working. Here's how we know it's not working. And I can keep doing this and keep talking you into working harder and sacrificing more. But I intuitively know this is not going to work. So we're going to need to shift. And I hope this builds trust. It might not build trust because I was really good at convincing you. I mean, great leaders are great manipulators or influencers, So I hope this builds trust, and I want to actually clean up this relationship first, and then see if we can take, put a whole nother chapter here. That takes a lot of guts to do because you can blame the market, blame the government, blame the everything, just to get yourself off the hook and like have it a story that in different times it would have worked.
Right. It happened to us. Yeah. And I'm thinking of like two different industries. One like Peloton, right? Like that was the great, pandemic success story. And then the pandemic started ending and it tanked, right?
Yep.
And also the cycling industry, which is kind of like a weird niche thing, but I kind of track that of like, they were doing also so well during the pandemic. Everything was like selling and the prices were going up and all the parts and all the accessories. And all these companies are now starting to go out of business.
Yep.
Because that stopped.
Yep.
And the prices were too high and the interest waned. But I can see that happening even to mom and pop. I can see that happening even in relationships where they're on a good, slide in their, the last 3 months were amazing in our marriage.
Yeah.
Great. Now is the perfect time to talk about from the capitalization of that.
Yes.
What do we need to be strategically looking at for the next 6 months to a year? What aren't we, right? It's kind of like a SWOT analysis, as cliche as that sounds.
Yep.
And that's why I love taking all these entrepreneurial ideas and applying them to therapy and taking all these therapeutic ideas and applying them to the world of entrepreneurship.
I heard Esther Perel, which I'm sure you're familiar with, say a saying where people were like wondering if she had gotten divorced and gotten married because she just said, I've been married 3 times. And she was describing, she says, oh no, I've been married to the same person, but we've had to get remarried in our own minds 3 times because this version of our relationship worked and then it didn't work. And instead of getting divorced, that's what most people do, is we're different. We were married young, blah, blah, blah story. And then, but no, we just decided to reinvent ourselves and say this next season of our life is about what? And both parties obviously have to be willing to do the work and reinvent themselves and see what's wanted and needed and listen to the other person and adapt and get off their own high horse and all their superiority and give themselves to the future that regenerates who they are. But to your point, it's like if it's gonna be long lasting, period, a company relationship, you can't be precious about where you were. You have to be committed to where you're going.
Yeah.
And that's why I think we were talking before we got started, is like why typical therapists, which you're not, are so Freudian in their view. That's like, oh, I am because, and they look to the past. And so I can't reinvent myself because actually I'd be betraying the story that I've told myself for a long time.
Yeah, it'd be dishonoring. Yeah.
I'd be,
And I see this all the time with clients of like, because I do a modality called neuroemotional technique, which uses muscle testing and Chinese medicine meridian points to find out not where the rational brain is holding the story, but where the somatic physiological story is and
cool.
how that butts heads. I would say 90% of the time, there's some story that someone's carrying about how they have to operate with someone, like a family member. They're like, well, I don't want to be this way, but I'm still carrying that trait that, but isn't that intergenerational themes? Isn't that supposed to happen? I'm like, I mean, it could,
If you want it.
but you're also choosing to show love and honor to your family member by doing something that you don't like, but honoring them and loving them this way has a greater power than you doing something different and finding a healthier way to be than that. And I see that I would say we all have that in some way, shape, or form to some, right? We have allegiance to some old story, whether we realize it or not.
Right.
Even the ones that we say we don't like, we may not do it that way, but we may do it in a different segment of our life. Same theme, just different output and different engagement with it.
Yes. Yeah. There's so much here. That what we call those rackets, which is what is the chronic complaint I've got. So let's just say my father didn't communicate very much. So therefore I don't communicate. Let's just say that's not me because I'm over communicating with my kids, but let's just say because my dad didn't, and I saw that modeled at home, and the mom wore the pants in the family, therefore I am the doormat, and my wife runs that. This is a very common story. And I think a lot of the frustration in relationships is women having to be the heads of the household, men complaining that their wives are complaining about being that. So anyway, let's just say that's some kind of chronic complaint, number one. Number two is there's always a system of behavior that keeps that complaint alive, right? So I have an idea, if I'm this guy that feels like I'm the doormat to my wife, I have an idea, but I'm not going to say it because she's going to, not going to listen to me anyway. Or I don't have enough time to actually get that invested the way she wants me to. So I'm not going to step up and do something extra. Or if I see a problem, if I see something she's doing with the kids, I'm not going to bring it up because she's going to retaliate, whatever the story is. So I keep this system of behavior going. So that's number two. Number three is there's always payoffs to the complaint. Always. It's an under the table negotiation. So the counterintuitive question is, why do I love being the doormat? People say, I don't love being the doormat. I don't. Okay, good. Well, how long you been doing it? 10 years? I say, and reality tells me you do. So let's just play this game. Let's say there are payoffs. Well, it's safer, no responsibility. It's her fault. I get to actually be superior to her. I get to complain about her.
I get to be a better person.
I get to maybe fool around on the side. I get to drink when I want to drink. I get to talk crap in front of the kids. I get to hang out with my buddies and talk crap. There's so much entitlement in there to that complaint. Their payoffs. What are the prices? Oh, low integrity. I'm not that empowered. I am a horrible example to my children, and I know that I feel guilt. I feel shame all the time. I've got a despairing view of the next 40 years. There's lots of prices we're paying, not because of what's happening, because of what I've participated in generating what's happening. And it takes guts to stand up and say, hey, here's what I've been doing. And there is a reciprocal relationship. She's also complaining about having to carry the weight of the family if I feel like I'm the doormat and can't say something. So we talk about it in that way, which people usually hate until they see it and they're like, oh, okay. Because I think to your point is responsibility is freedom, period. If I didn't help create or co-create what's here, I can't create what's next. So I always say that if there's not a now, there's not a next. If I don't get to now and how I've created this moment and how things are, if I'm unwilling to look at that, see it, be awareness of it, take responsibility for it, have language for it, don't act all confused, put language on it. and then just stand there, like without the shame. And people hide. I don't think shame's an emotion. I say it's a strategy. If like get out from behind yourself and how self-important you think you are, and get into some kind of whatever. For me, it's a faith conversation, just because like I can be reinvented nonstop. For me, that's the biggest faith conversations. Like no matter what happens, I can be, born, quote unquote, born again. I don't mean that in a religious way. I just mean like nothing, a million deaths is what I want. Keep reinventing, keep reinventing, keep reinventing. If I'm willing to do that, then I'm free. I'm free. Like nothing, no feedback, no criticism, no judgment can stop me. It'll fuel me. It's helpful. Thank you. I want to see that. I want to see where I am self-deluding about my own intention, because I say intention equals impact. So if I'm hearing impact, I'm going to own that oh, that must have been my intention, because that's what happened. Oh, I missed it. Sorry about that. Where did I miss it? Okay, great. Cool. Can we go again? Now, you might be with somebody that wants to resent instead of forgive, but that's a whole different conversation.
Whole different conversation. Yeah.
Right. And if that's the case, then good luck. But
yeah,
then that is what it is. And you could decide you want to stay married for the kids or whatever stories people have about that. But anyway, responsibility is freedom. And if I'm willing to look at how I'm lying to myself and own that, I really won't have much more time to think about how other people are lying, because I'm a mixed bag. I'm a mixed bag, and human beings are mixed bags. Period. I'm not like who's even in life, or definitely in like movies. There's not like a hero and a villain. We're both always. So if you're the hero of your own story, you're missing where your growth is, because it's in that dark corner you don't want to talk about. But if you can turn the lights on over there and be okay with it, you can connect with anybody.
Yeah.
That's why it's like when I meet somebody that's like the most narcissistic, crazy, criminal person, I can be their friend. Why? I know my criminal side. I know my dark side, and I'm not scared of it. It actually is my ally. It teaches me things. I don't want to follow it, but the fact that I can do it, the fact that I have done it, the fact that I'm complicit with it at times, the fact I've got all those horror stories, and I'm busy looking for a resource in that area of my life, and therefore I can connect with anybody.
Yeah.
And just
I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of the conversation with our clients and with whoever, who's listening to this today is, there's that side of you, and we can wrap up with this, is the side of us that we're protecting from, God forbid, if someone finds this out about me, I will be completely rejected. How do you bring that to the light, right? How do you transform that? How do you use that as a leverageable tool in that process, right? And I say this all the time. I've even had this conversation this morning with a client where, I do 50% of my week is couples counseling. And every single one of my, if you listen to my podcast, you'll hear this. If you talk to me within a certain amount of sessions, you'll hear this. It's no secret that in 2010, I got divorced. But that has, right? And I think no client has ever walked away from me or saying, oh, now that I found this out, I absolutely don't want to work with Jason.
Right.
And in fact, quite the opposite, right? It's like, oh, you have this other side of like, you've been there. Yes. I know what not to do too. I know how awful it can be. I know what that legal process is. I know what it's like to, like you said, to have friends who don't, who aren't going to join you on the next stages of your journey and just dismiss you for whatever reasons.
Right.
Let me walk you through these things. And I think that brings extra value to the table when, if everybody listening can ask themselves this question of like, what's the thing that, God forbid, if someone knew that I thought this, if someone knew that I believe this, if someone knew that this happened to me, if someone knew that I experienced this, they would absolutely reject me for it. I'd be shunned. No one would want to talk to me. No one would want to be friends with me. No one would want to be in a relationship with me. That's the stuff that is the transformation component of your life, could be, the beginning of that by just embracing that.
Yeah. Well, lots to talk about here.
Lots to talk about.
I'll try to be very concise with just a couple points on it.
Sure.
So let's see. So many ideas. First off, living in the story that if they knew that about me, I'd be rejected. I've already planned rejection.
Yes.
Because it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like if I told them they'd leave, tells me I can't be myself around them. So I'm not there anyway, right? So I'm already playing.
I'm already hiding.
I'm already a persona. I'm like wearing a mask. And so any kind, like the capacity for joy goes way down because of or even like the capacity for love goes way down because they're loving the mask. They're not loving me. So you're already setting yourself up to be right and to justify your own cowardice. And I've been there before, right? I've had secretive times in my life. I lived this double life for a long time, which led to the first divorce. I've been divorced twice. So, had plenty of like weird feelings about that and like what I'd make up people thought about that. Once people get to know me, they realize I'm pretty articulate about it and I'm owning it. And two very different stories about what happened and about how really I happened in both things. So, and I'm cool with any of it. So if I'm honest with myself and somebody says, "Hey, that's you're a loser," I'm like, "Oh, love you. That's
Great.
cool. I get it. Yeah, well, I get it. So you think you haven't made mistakes and haven't avoided conversations?
Yeah.
Ah, cool. Well, we're not really the same type of people anyway.
Right.
So so let's see what else. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I mean, to your first question, the first spot is I have to be willing to be honest with myself. So don't try to be honest with someone else until you're honest with yourself. That's why I think a journaling practice is a very healthy thing. And when I've been through dark times in my life, I don't journal. Why? I don't want to see it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to own it. But if you've got stuff that you're carrying around, just at least be willing, even just to start talking to yourself about it, which might sound like funny advice. Like just go on a walk and talk to yourself like you're your own audience. Like, here's what's really going on, man. And then, it's not written down. People can't find it and read it and they, post it on whatever. Just start talking to yourself in an honest way and realize, oh, I'm not dying. Like putting language to this level of despair or criminality or whatever's going on, you don't die. You actually become more alive. You might be more sad. That's different than dying. That's actually usually a sign of life because if you've got a conscious, your guilt is a sign of life. It's good. So, be guilty. Feel the guilt. Like because I think we're all born good. I don't think we're like born evil. I think we're born good. So do that. And then if you don't have anybody to talk to, that's a sign of the types of relationships you've created to protect yourself. So if you don't have anyone to talk to, find someone to say, hey, I've got some stuff I want to get off my chest. Can I share some things with you? And can I trust you to just keep it here? I just need to say something. Now, you can do that with a therapist, which is usually, that's a good spot to do it. Or a good spot to start. But if you don't have anybody in your life, okay, get a friend.
Yeah.
And if they won't be that for you, it's probably feedback you've not been that for them. So I've gotten used to asking people that I can tell are struggling, and they usually don't respond right away. But I just say, hey, is there anything you want to get off your chest, man? You seem like you got something on your mind that you don't know how to talk about. I'm just like, I'm okay with a sloppy version of what's going on for you. It's all good for me, man.
Yeah.
And I guarantee it won't scare me.
Well, I had a very good example of that this weekend at a conference that I was at. Someone I've known forever. It's like just their whole disposition was just constricted.
Off, yeah.
And I kept going, like, you doing okay? They're like, yeah, I'm getting, I mean, it was an integrated medicine workshop. So we're working on our stuff while we're there. And at the end of the weekend, he comes to me, he's like, can you save some time for us to workshop together? And then when I did show up, he's like, of the people that are here, you're the person the most that I know because of past conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, what took you so long? Right. Was my, because I know that person is a giver. They don't want to take up space. They're a wonderful human being, but they don't, but their whole role has been to give, not to ask.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And they desperately need it in that moment.
Sure.
And those of us who love this person, we're so happy to give.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you're that persona, and I've been that, I was a nurse out of college, and then I was a pastor for many years. And so folks that are like into other people and are givers, they usually have the most that they need to talk about because people are busy receiving from them, and it's a very safe space. And they are usually, that's why when I meet somebody that's really religious, I'm like, what's this guy's dark side?
Right.
I always know it. Or the guys that are so nice, I'm like, I wonder what he's pissed about, because nice guys are fucking angry.
Yeah.
And, I typicically try to provoke that in the training room. But yeah, man, I think that's a part of it. And there's if I put a button on it, I mean, maybe just the love for the audience is, you might feel like you got a long track ahead of you, and you might feel like you got time, but you might not. And when I was in my 30s, I, started making some decisions I thought I could outrun. And I thought some of my bad decisions, I would just hold on to, but life's really short. And so my invite to you is like, honor yourself enough to go after the best experience you can have in life. And if you got kids, if you've got a partner, if you got a lover, I was going to say they deserve that. I don't know if that's true, but that's your best gift to them, is to be most alive.
Right. You deserve that.
You deserve it. That's right. So whatever you're struggling with, especially dudes, I think, struggle with this the most, make this decision the most. It's not like a struggle, it's a strategy. But and we just settle for shit. And I am very committed to being a guy that helps people relate to life in a way that they get the most ROI, both on results and also relationally, and joy and contentment and all that type of thing. And I'm in that conversation myself always. So just get after it, Yeah. For some reason, the phrase for the last few months, I don't know how it came up for me, but just let it rip. That's like the phrase that's in my head. Just let it rip,
Sounds perfect.
We always say in the training room, don't be too proud to die.
Yeah.
Just go ahead and die. Go ahead, do it. And you'll get rebirth. That's how this works. That's how this works.
That's where ego tricks you up, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, first of all, I know we got to hold here, but I know we could keep going for probably an infinite amount of hours.
Forever, man.
Awesome. But that's why, thank you. Well, that's why you have 2 podcasts where people can hear more of that. So feel free to just plug those quickly and plug your website quickly.
Sure. So my website is takenewground.com. We do all types of coaching and training. And I'd mentioned the Revenant a couple times. You click up the public training. It's a groundbreaking. My business partner, who's 70 years old, is the GOAT in this world. His name is Dan Tacchini. His first coaching company was called, drumroll please, The Coaching Company. So he's been around for a while.
He's the OG, yeah.
He's the OG. He was around with Werner Erhard back in the Human Potential Movement. Cool. He was trained by him. He ran LifeSpring. He opened up more than half the country for John Hanley with LifeSpring. He is when I met Dan and saw him train, I thought, I'm going to be this guy's friend and learn from him the rest of my life. And now we're business partners, and he's my best friend. He's 70 years old. If you could ever come to a Revenant, come to it. Just see, especially while Dan's alive. I come there and try not to mess things up, but he's the GOAT. So anyway, Take New Ground. We work with, as I mentioned, founders and companies, and come clean up leadership teams. Don't talk to us if you don't want things to get a little messy, because they got to get messy. Yeah. But we're lovers of people, but we're love you enough to at least point out reality. So that's our work. Have had 2 historical podcasts. One, Raising the Bar with Ali. Second one, Naked Leadership Podcast. We love those, and I do this a ton too. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, Adrian.K on Instagram is an easy way to find me. And would love to always talk to anybody, encourage anybody, resource anybody, help somebody get connected. I know if you're connected to Jason's world, I'd love you already. So however I can help, we help turn around companies, we help turn around leadership teams, and we do all that negotiation type stuff, but always with a lot of heart,
With a lot of, yeah, that's what I'm finding, and that's what I'm connecting to here. So everybody, all those links will be in the show notes, and obviously, if you have any questions for either one of us, right, the Instagram is always pretty quick and easy for both of ours. And Adrian, again, thank you so much for the time, and
you're the man.
Very much looking forward. We'll do this again.
All right, buddy. See you, friend.
Thanks for listening to the You Winning Life podcast. If you are ready to minimize your personal and professional struggles and maximize your potential, we would love it if you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Jason Wasser, LMFT.